defied Speaker Mike Johnson by signing on to a democratically drafted discharge petition to force a vote on extending Obamacare tax credits for 3 years. Nicole Killian joins me now from Capitol Hill. Quite a day, Nicole. Catch us up. Well, it was quite a day that started this morning with those 4 Republicans signing on to a Democratic discharge petition that was led by leader Hockey Jeff that in essence would extend these enhanced tax subsidies for the next 3 years. Just a straight, clean extension. We saw a similar proposal over in the Senate fail, although 4 Republicans signed on to that measure as well. Also, the Republican Party that nobody saw coming this fast. 22 Republicans gone, just not there. They skipped votes. The whole thing on a week when Mike Johnson needed every single warm body in that chamber. Nearly 24 of his own people didn't even bother to show up. And here's the wild part. Nobody's really panicking out loud. Publicly, Johnson is cool, calm, collected. But behind closed doors, the situation is honestly getting out of control. Let me break this down for you. Mike Johnson is the Speaker of the House. He runs the whole show on the Republican side. And right now, he has one of the thinnest majorities in American history. We're talking the slimmest margins since the 1930s, since before World War II. Think about that for a second. The Republican Party controls the House by a paper-thin edge. 218 Republicans versus 21 Democrats. That's it. 218 to 214. And Johnson cannot lose more than one single Republican vote. Not 2, not 3, 1. That's all he gets. If even 2 Republicans vote against him on a party line bill, it fails. If they're just absent, it can fail. The math is brutally, brutally unforgiving. And this week, 22 of his own people weren't even in the building on Tuesday. Let me say that again because it's almost hard to believe. 22 Republicans did not vote for a single bill on Tuesday, then 7 on Wednesday, then 5 on Thursday. One after another, empty seats where Republican votes should have been. Now, some people will say, okay, Democrats also had absences. 21 of them skipped Tuesday too. And that's true. But here's the thing. Here's what makes this so different for Johnson. The Democrats can afford absences. They're in the minority. They have more cushion. Johnson has none. 0. He's working with a margin so thin that the entire Republican agenda can collapse just because someone called in sick or decided to go campaign instead of vote. And that right there is the real story. That's what's actually happening. Some of these Republicans aren't just absent. They're absent because they don't want to be there anymore. 36 House Republicans have already announced they are not running for re-election. 36. That breaks the record from 2018 when 34 Republicans walked away. And that year, Democrats swept the House and took control. People are already talking about history repeating itself. Think about what this means when you have that many members mentally checked out, physically absent, running for governor or senator, or just plain done with Congress. You don't have a functioning majority. You have a house of cards. And right now, the wind is starting to pick up. But wait, it gets worse because even the Republicans who do show up aren't always voting the way Johnson needs them to vote. This isn't just an attendance problem. This is a loyalty problem, a control problem, a we can no longer pretend everything is fine problem. Let me give you the context you need. Just last week, Johnson went to war with his own Senate Republicans. The Senate passed a deal, a bipartisan deal, to fund the Department of Homeland Security. TSA workers are going unpaid. Airports are backed up. It's spring break season. Millions of Americans are trying to travel. And the lines are nightmare level long because there aren't enough TSA agents showing up because they haven't been paid. The Senate, controlled by Republicans, passed a compromise bill. It would have funded all of Homeland Security, including TSA, but it excluded new money for ICE and Border Patrol because that's what Democrats demanded to allow it through without a filibuster. Johnson looked at that bill and called it a joke. A joke. His words. He rejected it. The House passed their own version instead, a bill that fully funds DHS, including ICE and border enforcement, for 8 weeks. And then the House packed up and left town for a 2-week recess. Both chambers are now on vacation, and the DHS shutdown still going. 42 days and counting, no end in sight. Just think about that for a second. 42 days. Unpaid TSA workers, backed up airports, a shutdown that's dragging into spring break, and Congress left for 2 weeks. This is serious. But here's the thing, and this is where the story gets really interesting. Johnson isn't just fighting Democrats. He's fighting everyone. He's fighting Senate Republicans. He's fighting his own conference. He's fighting members who are running for other offices and have zero reason to help him anymore. He's fighting centrist Republicans who are terrified about the 2026 midterms. He's fighting hardline conservatives who think he's too soft. He's fighting a war on every single front at the same time. And the people around him know it. One House Republican, speaking anonymously because they didn't want to go on record, put it bluntly. They said something along the lines of, Nobody in the conference actually thinks they're keeping the majority after the midterms. Nobody, except maybe Johnson himself. That's staggering. His own members privately believe they're going to lose the House in November. And when members believe they're going to lose, they start acting like it. They stop showing up. They stop taking risky votes. They start thinking about their next campaign, their next job, their next move. They're not thinking about Johnson's agenda anymore. Let me give you a specific example of how bad the attendance situation has gotten. Back in January, Republican leaders held a war powers vote on Venezuela. Very important vote, very tight. They kept the vote open for more than an hour, just waiting for one specific member, Rep. Wesley Hunt of Texas, to literally get in a car and drive over and walk through the door and vote an hour. They held the vote open for an hour just for one person, and that worked that time. But you can't keep doing that. You can't run a legislative body like you're chasing people down to sign permission slips. And then there was the moment, and this one is wild, when a Republican member was actually in Washington when he found out his mother had died, and leadership had to ask him to stay for a few more hours before going to be with his family because they needed his vote. His mother had just died, and they asked him to stick around. That's the kind of situation Johnson is managing every single week. There was another case. A Republican with a serious heart condition told by his doctor not to fly. GOP leaders called him anyway. He got on a plane. He flew to Washington. He voted. This is what governing with a one-vote margin looks like. It's chaos dressed up in a suit. And now with 22 members just not showing up at all on a random Tuesday in March, the math is getting scarier by the day. Let me simplify this. Johnson has 218 Republicans. He can lose one on any given party line vote. But if 22 of them don't show up, the majority flips. Democrats become the largest group voting. The entire Republican agenda dead just like that. On routine bills, this isn't a disaster because Democrats sometimes skip votes too, but on the big stuff, the stuff that actually matters, the government funding, the spy powers, the housing bills still waiting to come to the floor, that's where this gets absolutely terrifying for Johnson. Some Republican lawmakers are already saying things out loud that they probably shouldn't be saying. One lawmaker told reporters, "The situation is pretty untenable when you have absences." That's a Republican talking about his own side. Others have described Johnson's situation in even harsher terms privately. And here's the kicker. This is where it gets truly serious. Johnson doesn't just have to worry about absent members. He has to worry about members who show up and then threaten to vote against him unless he gives them something. Every single Republican who has a complaint about their district, about a bill, about a policy, now has enormous leverage because Johnson can't afford to lose them. Majority Whip Tom Emmer described it this way. He said some members are demanding audiences with leadership, even with Trump himself, just by threatening to defect. One Tennessee Republican reportedly threatened to tank a party priority just to get a boost from the president in his governor's race. And honestly, it worked. When you have leverage like that, you use it. And right now, every Republican in a tight spot has leverage. But here's the real issue that nobody is saying loudly enough. This isn't just about one bad week with 22 no-shows. This is a structural problem. The foundation is cracking. The party that needs unity more than anything is fracturing in real time over abortion, over healthcare subsidies, over the shutdown, over Johnson's leadership style, over Trump's approval ratings dropping, over Democratic candidates outperforming in state after state after state. The Democrats just won special elections in New Jersey, Virginia, and Tennessee. States where Republicans expected to be competitive, and those results sent a chill through the Republican conference that hasn't gone away. What happens when members from swing districts look at those results and start doing the math on their own survival? They stop worrying about Johnson's agenda. They start worrying about their own. And that is exactly what's happening with the Obamacare subsidies fight. 4 centrist Republicans, all from swing districts, all facing tough re-elections, did something almost unthinkable. They signed a discharge petition. That's a procedure where members of Congress can go around the Speaker and force a vote on a bill without his permission, without his blessing. They teamed up with Democrats to force the issue. Centrist Republicans teaming with Democrats to go over the Speaker's head. That's not normal. That's not how it's supposed to work. That's an open revolt. And these weren't fringe members, hardliners, or troublemakers. These were the quiet establishment get-along members, the ones who are supposed to be Johnson's most reliable voters, the ones who normally never make noise, and they snapped. Why? Because they're terrified that without extending enhanced Obamacare subsidies, their voters back home are going to face massive premium increases, and those voters are going to blame them personally at the ballot box. 74% of voters want those subsidies extended, and Johnson told them no, so they went around him. This is the 4th discharge petition to reach 218 signatures this year, the 4th, the most for any Congress since the 1930s. More proof that Johnson's grip on the floor is loosening by the week. And then there's the chaos with the SCORE Act, like a Bill Johnson's team actually wanted to pass. They yanked it off the floor because conservatives led by Reperch, Roy blocked it. Johnson canned other votes that same evening. Bills just didn't happen because the votes weren't there. His own most important bill of the week pulled from the floor. Gone. And he's still out there telling reporters, I have not lost control of the House. But here's the thing. When a speaker has to say that out loud, that's usually not a good sign. When CNN's Manu Raju asked House Minority Leader Jeff the same question, have you lost control of the House? Essentially, Jeff just smiled. He said, the situation speaks for itself. No additional commentary needed. And now we're in a moment where Johnson is heading into the most important stretch of the legislative year, with major bills still on the table. Midterm elections looming in November, a DHS shutdown still unresolved, a Senate he's now openly feuding with, a conference where nearly 24 members just skipped votes on a Tuesday, and 36 members already planning their exits. This is serious. Really serious, because the 2026 midterms are coming, and history is not on Johnson's side. The party in the White House almost always loses seats in the midterms. Republicans only have a 4-seat margin right now. They can afford to lose maybe 3 seats and still hold the House if every single race goes their way. If every candidate performs perfectly, if Trump's numbers stabilize, if the economy cooperates, that's a lot of ifs. And right now, the mood inside the Republican Party behind closed doors, away from the cameras, is closer to dread than confidence. One member privately said something devastating, something that really does capture where this all is right now. The member said, nobody thinks we're keeping the majority. Nobody except maybe the speaker. Think about what it means when your own team privately believes they're going to lose. It means the 22 empty chairs on Tuesday aren't just an attendance problem. They're a symbol. They represent members who have already started thinking beyond Johnson, beyond this session, beyond this majority. Members who are mentally running their next campaign instead of casting their next vote. And that's the real story here. That's the thing beneath the thing. Because Johnson's math problem isn't just about numbers, it's about motivation. You can count votes all day long, but if the people who are supposed to cast those votes don't feel like they have a reason to show up, the numbers don't matter. And right now, a growing number of House Republicans don't feel like they have a reason to show up. The government is shut down. Airport lines are 3 hours long. TSA workers haven't been paid. The Senate and House can't agree on anything. The Speaker is calling Senate Republicans' deal a joke. The centrists are filing discharge petitions. The conservatives are blocking bills on the floor. And somewhere in all of this, 22 Republicans just decided, yeah, I'm not coming in Tuesday. This is where Mike Johnson is right now. Right now, on March 31st, 2026, he's the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. He has the gavel. He has the title. He has Trump's support for now. But does he have control? That's the question that nobody in Washington wants to answer out loud. Because honestly, looking at the empty chairs, the failed votes, the discharge petitions, the senators he's feuding with, the members who've already mentally left the building, the answer is becoming harder to avoid, and the biggest votes of the year haven't even happened yet. If 22 people go missing on a Tuesday with no major bills on the schedule, what happens when the real stuff comes to the floor? What happens when housing, surveillance powers, government funding, all of it lands at once? What happens when one more Republican gets sick or loses a primary or decides to prioritize their Senate campaign over Johnson's agenda? 1 seat. That's all it would take. Lose one more Republican in any way. A death, a resignation, a health crisis, a race they lose. And governing this House becomes virtually impossible. Multiple Republicans have admitted this privately. And right now, those risks are not theoretical. There's a member whose health GOP leaders are quietly monitoring. There's another facing calls to resign after a scandal. There's a member who lost a primary and has been skipping votes ever since. There's a member who nearly voted with Democrats just to get something for his own district. Every single one of these situations is real. Every single one could tip the scales. Mike Johnson is walking a tightrope and the wind is picking up. And 22 of the people who were supposed to help him balance just decided to stay home. This is not going away. This gets worse before it gets better.